Want to welcome John Di Girolamo to the show. John, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on. You have a topic that I think is going to interest my audience and something that is really important. So, John, thanks again for being here. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and why you are on the show?
Sure. So really happy to be here. Thanks for having me. And I'm an author, a speaker, and anti-human trafficking advocate. And I've written a couple of books. And my latest book is about how to keep kids safe on the internet and a guide for parents. So it's a very practical, common sense oriented book that really just gives parents tips and what they need to know and some ideas of what they can do to protect their kids.
Yeah, now this seems, we had a conversation maybe a couple years ago about trafficking, and it seems like it's foreign. It seems like something that's out there that's happening somewhere else. But from what I understand, that's not the case, and that the parents nowadays really do need to step up and be aware of what's going on, look for signs. Talk to us a little bit about what trafficking is, and can you even touch on the fact that most of us think that it's happening somewhere else?
Sure, I think the movie Sound of Freedom was a well done movie, and it really brought some exposure to the American public. But the rest of the story is that it happens right here in America. It happens in every state, and it happens in small towns and suburban America. And I wrote a book about trafficking as well, featuring on purpose small town and suburban America. I didn't want to focus on the border or big cities because I think a lot of people kind of know some of that, but they don't realize that it's hiding in plain sight. It's right here in our own backyard, and parents need to know that that's happening, and the situation is getting worse based upon technology and just based upon the vulnerability of kids out there.
Yeah, so why are people being trafficked? I mean, it to most of us who don't really look into this, it doesn't make any sense. Why would somebody want another person? Can you open that door for us
Yeah,
a little bit to help us understand?
sure. So, other than drugs, it is the second most profitable criminal activity on a global basis.
Hmm.
So, it really starts with being about the money. And these criminals, they're going to do uh, lots of things. They're going to sell drugs. They're going to be potentially part of gangs. They're going to be gun runners. And trafficking is a piece of that puzzle. And what's different is, unlike a drug where you might have to grow it or create it in a lab, we're talking about a person. And that person is being traumatized on a regular basis, day after day, multiple times a day. And it's very profitable. You don't have to grow it. Um, and it's just to me one of the most evil things that somebody can do to another human being. You're talking about another person, and the way that they're being treated is just horrible. And in my opinion, is worse than drugs. But it's also intertwined with drugs, because a lot of these criminals will try to use drugs to control their victims and get them
Right.
addicted, so they'll do anything they say.
Yeah. You have some real life examples of predator tactics that are used to exploit teens and kids. What can you share some of those things with us to help us understand how this really works?
Sure. So, I was doing my research on trafficking, and I started getting a lot of questions about the online portion of trafficking, which definitely occurs. And I wanted to broaden that topic in the sense of, these predators are out there for not just trying to exploit someone through trafficking, but other reasons. So typically, a predator is going to approach a teen or a child to either get content, extort money, or to meet for some kind of physical encounter. And they're really looking at their victims differently, whether they're males or females. So typically, with a male, they're after money. They're like a sextortion type of situation. And for the females, they're really looking for more explicit content, or to meet in person. And that's kind of the why. And when you think of, well, where are they doing this online? Well, they're going where the kids are. They're going to the most popular programs like Snapchat, TikTok, Kick, games like Minecraft and Roblox. And so they're going to go there, and they're all about trying to make this teen or child feel special. They're trying to fulfill a need, and today's kids, they think of online friends as real friends. They don't
Hmm.
think that it's really that much of a difference because they've grown up with this technology.
Yeah.
And so these predators are going to set up multiple profiles, many times fake profiles, but they'll set it up something to match who they're targeting. They're going to say, "Hey, I like soccer and I like Taylor Swift and you do too, and let's be friends." And they just start that grooming process. Um, and so that's one of the tactics that they'll do, and it's a bit of a numbers game. They may send 100 different chat requests, or being in a private message or chat room in a game, and they're going to see who reacts. And they're just very good at figuring out what that other person needs to be told, and they're going to be very happy to tell it, and then start that grooming process.
So you've described the grooming process. Why? I mean, I have to go back and say too, some of the games that you mentioned online, I know those because my kids used to play those.
Yeah.
And it's kind of blowing my mind to know that something that we looked into looked like an innocent game, but they're connecting on the internet. They're connecting with people they don't know who could be or may not be friends. They may be predators. So once they're groomed, what's the danger now? If this is just an online thing, where does the danger come in meeting these people online?
Sure. Some of those games might be appropriate for whatever age, that kid that's using it. But every single game, every single app has the ability to go into um, a chat room or private messaging. And it may not
Right.
even be within the game. It may jump to a program like Discord, which is very popular, where the
Yeah.
predators hang out. And so the next thing you know, they're starting to ask that person for information. Where do you go to school? How old are you? Um, Trying to gain that trust, gather information. And they're going to generally immediately either ask for some kind of picture, or if they're close by, to meet in person. And when you talk to some of the experts, that grooming process, can happen in a matter of hours. And there's a
Mm.
story that I tell. I was talking to a police officer, multiple police officers, who told the same story, where a profile was set up as an attractive, say, college age type of woman. They send their picture to a teenage boy and say, "Hey, let's be friends." And the boy sees this, very good looking girl. He clicks yes, no problem. The next thing you know, she is sending him explicit pictures, probably downloaded from a pornography site. Well, now she's pressuring him to say, "Look, I've sent you these pictures. uh, you now need to send them to me." And he
Oh,
sends them, potentially, and immediately she's asking for money. And if he sends it, she's asking for more money again. And the police officer said that that scenario that I just described took less than 24 hours to happen. So
wow.
a parent can go from, "Hey, everything's great," and the next day, why is their teenager stressed? Why are they locking themselves up in the room? Why do they seem depressed? Or why are they lashing out? Now, a lot of times, teenage behavior, anything could be like that, right? That causes
Yeah,
that
sure.
type of behavior. But that's typically what happens, and you hear about depression on the rise, self harm on the rise for teens. And when the officer told me that that can happen within 24 hours, unless that teenager talks to a trusted adult and tries to get help, they're just going to spiral downward because these predators will absolutely send out those pictures to everyone in their contact list. That's friends, family, classmates,
Hmm.
grandma, etc. And that's happened multiple times. And the threat of that is very disturbing to a teen. And unfortunately, a lot of times they'll just follow through. They don't care. They want to punish that person for not paying them or not paying them enough. And it happens, unfortunately, way too often. And I tell that story because a lot of people assume that predators are after girls, and they are, but boys are vulnerable too. And parents
Yeah.
have to realize that that's a tactic that predators will use specifically for boys.
So what you described was what you just called sextortion. And I think
Yes.
that's important for us to realize because I think that's something that we don't often think about. If I've got a daughter, I'm really going to be looking out for her, but my son, not so much. What you're saying is that's not the case. They're looking for, in this case, they're looking for money. And the devastation that we do see, we know that there's record cases of suicide and depression and all those things in our youth.
Right.
Quite honestly, when my kids were in high school, which was just a few years back, often they would come home and say someone got in trouble for sexting. It
Right.
sounds a little bit like what you're talking about, but on a more local level. Can you touch on that? Why should parents be worried about that? I mean, after all, yeah, it's a picture of my son or my daughter, but really, who's it going to harm? I mean, I think hopefully most parents don't think that way, but I know some do. So, can you talk about the sexting and the issue with that?
Sure. So I was involved. I'm part of a nonprofit that goes into schools and teaches about digital safety, online safety, etc. And so just this was just small town high school, um, not a scientific study, but when they surveyed ninth grade class, and that's where it was. That's where they were doing this training, and 39% of ninth grade high schoolers said that they knew somebody who was being extorted by someone they met online.
Hmm.
That's a huge number for just ninth
Wow.
graders.
Yeah.
And if you step back, the question, the first question really is why are kids sending images of themselves? When you talk to someone my age, you would never even think of something like that. But yet it's very, very common um, that, that happens. And some of the stats out there are 75 to 90% of a high schooler has sent or received some kind of explicit picture by the time they graduate high school.
Yeah.
Now, the question that people need to ask is, well, why are they doing it in the first place? And I go back to a couple things. One of them is that you've got a this generation is just bombarded with explicit images. Pornography is just a click away from these programs like Snapchat and Kick, things like that.
Yeah.
And the average age now of seeing an image is about 10 years old. Now, that
Hmm.
may or may not be done on purpose, but when kids see explicit images, a lot of times it becomes an addiction. You talk to psychologists today about
Yeah.
issues facing teens. That's one of the very top issues. And so now you've got a teenager who's maybe been looking at um, explicit images for a couple of years. So it's become normalized. And now when somebody asks them at school, hey, send me a picture. Well, if they've been looking at content, creating their own content doesn't seem that odd or unusual because they've
That's right.
been, it's just become normalized. So then they send it. And then, of course, many times the person on the other end will promise, oh, I'll never send it to anybody else and things like that. And the teen mindset today is they think that is kind of fun and flirty.
Yeah.
If you talk to people at Bark Software, which is a parental control software company, their vice president was doing a presentation and said that teens look at sending explicit pictures of themselves as the new first base. And
Hmm.
I think to most adults, that to me, that's just like, what are you talking about? What do you mean that's the new first base? Sending pictures, and then it gets sent, and the next thing you know, that picture is now being sent um, and shared with other people. And if you take that to the next step, well, your child might be in middle school, and all of a sudden there's a group chat of 20 kids. And now all of a sudden a picture is sent. Well, your kid may not even ask for a picture, but now your child has child pornography or CSAM, child sexual abuse material, on their phone.
That's right.
And they didn't even ask for it. And it just shows up
Yeah.
because they're on a group chat. And so it just can spread like wildfire. And that's where cyberbullying comes in, and causes all these emotional issues because um, the teenager may have no idea that this was the unintended consequences of their actions of just, oh, I'll just be fun and flirty.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a scary thing. John, I work for Covenant Eyes. So Bark and Covenant Eyes are very similar. Covenant Eyes is more for, the 10, 12-year-old on up, where Bark is typically for younger. So I'm very aware of some of the things that you were talking about. And if anybody that's listening or watching thinks that the porn industry is just out there and it's not proactive, your head is in the sand, because they have been leading the way since the internet. When the internet came out, they were the ones that really pushed for, let's figure out how to get streaming video on the internet so we can make more money. And before, let's face it, growing up, John, we had to go to a store and ask the guy behind the counter for a magazine, which none of us really wanted to do at 10, 12 years old. Now it's in our pocket. We carry it around with us 24/7, and it's not usually regulated. So, like you said, 10 years old is the first average age of exposure to pornography. It is addictive. The dopamine rush sets in, and images that you and I saw as kids, I'm sure we still have those burned in our brains because it does something to you. And so the porn industry is using that. They're now looking at this virtual reality. Apple came out with virtual reality goggles, and it's going to continue. So we as parents, we've got to get to a place where we are aware of what's going on and proactively protect our kids. So I love what you're doing. I think that this is a wake-up call. Some of the things you've been talking about is a wake-up call for our listeners. I want to go back to, we've heard it growing up in the church, taking God out of schools, no longer have prayer in schools. Those kinds of things that we're separating the church from our education system and from the state. How do you think that taking God out of schools and the public square has increased the pornography use?
Yeah, I absolutely do. When you take God out of people's lives, something else is going to fill that space, and that something
Yeah.
else isn't going to be good. And we see biblical truth being replaced with, make up your own truth, and right and
Yeah.
wrong becomes blurred. And that includes devaluing human life, the vulnerable. You have, marriage being delayed, and people being told that that's just an old custom. Nobody really needs it. You've got
Hmm.
a modern culture that worships celebrity, which is a very much look at me. What can I do that's even more crazy to get clicks, attention,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
etc. And so, and you couple that with pornography viewing, and girls are affected too. So it's not just boys. And
That's right.
what does that do? Well, it sends a message that this is this is what an intimate relationship looks like. And it's telling boys, well, this is how you treat women or females. And
Yeah.
the trends in pornography are more violent, more, um, I would just say, more raunchy, more,
Yeah.
just really kind of treating people badly. It's not some, romance that's showing more flesh. It's a lot more. Than that. And so so now a lot of women, females, are looking at that and going, well, I guess that's how I act. And and there's stories out there. I'll just tell you real quick from a place called Defend Young Minds,
Hmm.
which has books that kind of help talk to kids about this issue. And the writer was talking about her daughter who came home, 12 years old, and was very excited. She had her first kiss with her quote, boyfriend. Next day comes home and completely different attitude. Mom asked, well, why? What happened? And she said, well, the boyfriend, 12-year-old boyfriend, started choking her because that's what he saw in a pornography video and thought that that's what girls liked.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's exactly right.
it doesn't get more sad than that. I don't know what else.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are all things that those of us who are kind of helping society to understand that pornography is not innocent. It's destroying our country. It's destroying our churches from the inside out. Um, we have 70% of guys in the church are looking at porn on a regular basis, and you mentioned women too. 33% of women in the church are viewing pornography on a regular basis. Those numbers make your jaw drop when you really understand the truth behind that, because we go to church, we take part in our weekly worship services, and we pretend like it's not there. And the church pretends like it's not there. And so it's festering and it's growing like a cancer, and it's destroying our society, our marriages, our families. That's what the enemy wants. So thank you for bringing this to light. I had Brittany De La Moore on a show a while back, who was a former porn star. And she talked about what it was like in the industry. Even if you just want to take it that far, the things that she said, and you mentioned this earlier, that she was on drugs. They kept her on drugs so that she had to stay in the industry. She couldn't escape. It's all set up. It's a revolving door for those involved in the industry, and if we're watching it, we're feeding it, and so and it's destroying our lives on this end too. So, John, we're going to be running out of time here shortly. I want to talk more, but there's two things I want to ask you. I know that when we first started handing our phones to our teenagers, we put blockers on. How are teens circumventing those parental controls on phones and laptops and all the devices that we now carry in our pocket?
Sure. So there's a couple different ways. One of them is they can get um, apps that will hide what's on your phone screen, or vault apps where it's a way to hide pictures, other kinds of things, um, and other kinds of spoofer apps that make it look like you're in one location when you're in a different location. And
Mm,
so
yeah.
so for example, um, the calculator app does real math. But when you go to the App Store, underneath it, it says hide your photos and secrets. And, in the old days, if you wanted to be sneaky, you had to be either creative or you ask a friend. Now you just have to ask the internet. So I suggest every one of the listeners go to YouTube and type in, what do I do if I have strict parents? And you will see thousands of videos created
Mm,
by teens, for teens, telling them exactly how to circumvent any parental control software that's on there. Um, I've heard of things where they'll set the time zone differently. So maybe there's a restriction that says, hey, it's 10 o'clock, your phone turns off, but not if you're in Hawaii time, for example.
That's right.
So,
Yeah.
uh, and it just goes on and on when you type in for this kind of help. And so one of the recommendations is a parent needs to absolutely know what's getting downloaded on their phone, on their kid's phone,
Yeah.
so they can
Yeah.
control it, they can monitor it, and I say things like, there's no such thing as a 14-year-old's privacy. Check the
Mm.
phone,
No.
um, go in and review what's going on a regular basis. Um, you're paying for that phone. They're not an adult, um, and you just need to be the person, the parent that's on top of things.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, we can no longer sit back and say, I'm just not into technology. I just don't understand it. We have to put the effort in because our
Yeah,
kids are growing up. We used to laugh years ago when started getting these devices that, hand it to my kids. They can figure out how to fix my computer. They're going
right.
to figure it out. They are going to figure it out. We can't sit back and say, I'm not into it. We've got to know what's going on out there. There are a lot of things online that we can do as parents to learn about how to be current on all the things that are going on. Don't put your head in the sand. Your kids' lives are at stake and their eternities are at stake. John, I want to finish with the last question, and that is tips for parents. Now that we've scared everyone to death, what tips do you have for them that can help them protect their kids?
Yeah, we've talked about some of them. A couple of other ones are, consider using a dumb phone, especially for the younger
Hmm.
kids. So, so there isn't the ability to send pictures, things like that, get an internet access. You absolutely want to approve as a parent what gets downloaded.
Yeah.
Use software that can help you control what's going on. And the big thing is you have to have those awkward conversations with your
Yeah.
child and teenager about what happens on there. But it's a great opportunity to explain your values, go back to some biblical values of
Yeah.
what sexuality looks like, um, from a biblical perspective, and and it's an opportunity to be able to kind of reinforce those conversations about how you think kids should be looking at the world, and be able to say, look, every kid makes mistakes. If you get in trouble, come to me. We need to work on this as a family. I'm on your team. I want to help. Um, I know it's going to be embarrassing or whatever it might be. And there's lots of resources out there that can help
Yeah.
parents have those conversations, um, and figure out how you have that conversation with your 9-year old versus your 15-year-old.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so important. Be involved. Help your kids to understand that you are the person they can trust because the internet is actively seeking them out and trying to build that trust, like you said, with these groomers, trying to make friendships with. And we've heard the stories in the paper of people disguising themselves as teens and they're in their 40s and 50s. And
Yep.
we have to make sure our kids know that regardless of what the conversation is, how embarrassing it may be, that we are the safe place. We'll give them the truth because they're not finding it out there. Like you said, John, those images and those videos of pornography at 9, 10 years old, it burns that into their minds and they think that's the way God's idea of sex is, and it's not. It's
Right.
perverted, it's twisted, and society is buying into that. So great advice. Do you have anything you want to share before we wrap this up with those who are listening and watching today?
Yeah, I think that kids are bombarded with a lot of these things from everywhere. So it's important that you know who your kids' friends are and who your kids'
Mm,
friends' parents are. What are they doing
yeah,
and what do they allow? Because a lot of times you might have, say, a lot of restrictions, but they go over a friend's house and the friend says, "Hey, look what's on my phone or my laptop," or something like that. So it's important to be as involved as ever. And unfortunately, it seems like we've got the perfect storm of a lot of busy parents. Technology
Oh,
is so, a lot of kids are on the internet or playing with an iPad or something at 4 or 5 years old, and they're just way ahead of the parents from a technology standpoint. Um, and you've got these predators that it's just so easy. You mentioned something about, um, the internet's in their pocket. And if that kid is online, that means anyone in the world potentially can see them. So the predator's in the pocket, even though that child might be sitting at the kitchen table while you're making dinner, they may or may not be safe because who knows
that's right.
who's chatting them up, and it's a really scary time to be a parent these days for sure. Um, and the safe space is within that family, and with the church, with God, with your relationship with Christ. That's the safe space, and that's where you want your kid to run to, not run away from.
Amen. Amen. John, where can people find out more about you? We've talked about your books. Where can they get your books? I want to be able to let them connect with you directly. Where can they do that?
Sure. So all the books are selling on Amazon, so it's easy to find those there. I also have a website called itisnotabout.com. So all my books start with "It's not about something," like it's not about the sex, is about human trafficking, and it's about the people who have different perspectives on that. And it's not about the predator because it isn't. The predators are out there, but it's about what you as a
Yeah.
parent need to know and can do, and some tips in there. And so if you go to the website, there's a way to contact me, and I love talking to different people and getting their perspectives. And I've had a lot of people come and just tell me their stories, and
Yeah.
and so that's a great way to do it. And that's itisnotabout.com.
We'll put those links and everything in the show notes so that people can go there and grab those. They're also on the screen. Um, John Di Girolamo, thank you so much for joining us today. Love to have you back sometime and talk more about this important topic, because we can't learn enough about it, because technology is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it's constantly on the edge of destroying our society if we allow it. So, John, thank you so much, and we appreciate you being on.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. It was a great talk, and really appreciate the time to connect with your audience.